Welcome to the A Minute to Midnight show, folks. This is Tony, and I'm glad to have you joining us today as I interview Gary Huffman and Doug Woodward, and it's a pretty interesting discussion. It goes down a few different directions, so I hope you enjoy the show, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can catch us on iTunes and on our website, aminutemidnight.com as well. I want to welcome Gary Huffman and Doug Woodward back to the A Minute to Midnight shows. Nice to be chatting to you two today, and we've got a few subjects we want to cover today, so great to have you joining us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Tony.
Awesome. So I think we will throw to you first, Gary, and I think you want to share a bit of stuff about Acchain and blockchain, which I've covered a little bit a few weeks ago, and you've got a bit more information for us.
Yes, and some of it is older information, but I just haven't heard anybody talking about it, you know. But I want to read just a couple more current things from a few websites from that kind of relate to this, not necessarily talking about Acchain, but just how much people are talking about cryptocurrency and how important it's going to be in the near future. On April 17th, this is from the AT Times, and it says, messages from China show digital currency is taking off. And then one of the statements on here was announcements from the People's Bank of China and the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. And why would it be the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences? Well, I want to talk about that in a minute. Show the government is serious about exploring crypto. So the government is exploring crypto. I think they have some laws against certain things with cryptocurrency, but yet the government is exploring it. And then on May 2nd, from cryptolines.com, one of the cryptocurrency websites, says the IMF affirms crypto assets have the potential of traditional currencies. And then May 20th, this is just a couple days ago, Apple founder Steve Wozniak has said he believes that Bitcoin is more valuable than the gold or the US dollar. Traditional currencies are kind of phony.
That's interesting.
So, yeah. And then this one's actually from back a ways. A lot of press releases came out from the Acchain organization about their new cryptocurrency, which just was, tested and released last fall. January 7th, Acchain, the token that fuels the Acchain, is meant to be the standard token of global circulation for the A-SDR digital currency basket and will ultimately be the standard way to settle digital currency purchases everywhere if everything goes as planned. And then it also says, see it as a digital gold reserve. ACC, or Acchain, creates a brand new remittance and settlement system for global digital currencies. So that's what they're creating their coin for. It's for a global purpose.
I'm still learning about this. I mean, I have a little bit of familiarity with blockchain and cryptocurrencies and things like that. The Acchain, I'm just kind of beginning to learn a bit about. And so I guess a question is this strictly dealing with currency, or is it a way to kind of digitally mark all of your assets? And in effect, sort of, it's kind of like asset tagging and keeping inventory and tracking your fixed assets.
Right. And that's what they say in all, even in they have a white paper out, and that's what they say is, and in some of those videos, their main promotional videos, they talk about digitizing all assets. So, when they talk about exchange, asset exchange, they're talking about you can sell your shirt or your car or your house to someone else anywhere in the world using Acchain, their cryptocurrency, because it'll all be digitized. And that's what they're working on now, is digitizing all assets, according to those videos and some of their statements.
Well, it's for me, I'm still having a hard time kind of coming across with a a good mental picture of how this would exactly work. But currency I can understand because of the fact that our currency systems are essentially digitized. They're not blockchain, but they're digitized so that money in effect is created on a computer in a field. Basically, numbers are added in or subtracted away. Whereas this looks like it's attempting to digitize physical assets. And so how do we move from a physical asset into a digital, I guess, would it be like a resemblance? I'm trying to think of the right word, for how does one move again from, I'll just leave it that way as the question. How does one move from a digital or a physical version to a digital version of a physical asset?
Well, I will tell you right now, I'm not a financial analyst or a financial expert.
Well, I know a little bit about finance. I'm a CFO in my spare time and teach that at a university level. So I know a bit about that. And we can certainly talk some more about just the concept of blockchain and potential, new currencies and so forth. But I was just trying to understand. I mean, I'm looking at the Acchain site right now, and it's easy to pick up that it must be from China because they have a hard time getting subject and verb matching in terms of plural. It's like a singular subject and a plural verb, or vice versa. So
the thing is, it's from China, but it is not just Chinese. I think the Chinese are probably the main drivers, but there's tie-ups with people from Britain and all sorts of other places. I'll just read a quote from Serena Lin, who is the spokesperson for Acchain and AC Coin, and she said, AC Coin is perhaps the best kept secret in the digital world, suggested Lin, representing years of work initiated even before the launch of Bitcoin. AC Coin was designed and configured complete with its own ecosystem to be the premier anchoring or digitizing token on the planet. It has the ability to convert and later reconstitute both tangible and intangible assets to and from the digital universe. Every coin and token not anchored to a quantifiable asset, even including Bitcoin, is merely blockchain too. Only those coins or tokens anchored to something identifiable and quantifiable deserve to be called blockchain 3, the final phase of the digital revolution. Coins backed by assets will also be more price stable, experts say, and therefore much more suitable for daily commerce. Interestingly, now that's written in, pretty good English, so I'm not quite sure why that, is it deliberate what they've done with the slightly dodgy English in those videos? I wonder,
I don't know. I'm just looking at some of their web pages and noticing some of the English. It's okay English. It's just it's a little bit pidgin, I guess.
Yes,
is one of the terms we use.
You'll see also in their video, though, the videos that they are tied in with IDAX, which is an industrial body whose purpose is to establish policy and guidelines that enable digital assets to be adopted into the mainstream economy. And basically the people that are launched IDAX, and that's right in those Acchain videos, two main players that they've identified are Eric van der Kleij, or Kleij, I don't know how you pronounce his name, and he is a former CEO of Tech City UK and worked for Prime Minister David Cameron and chaired an advisory group for the UK government. And the other guy is David White, and he was Royal Bank of Scotland Financial Market Division for a number of years in the Technology Innovation Department. And he also co-hosted a festival of blockchain and emergency technologies called CogX in 2017. So there is definitely, it's not just Chinese. I know I had Lynette Zhang on the show recently, and she believes that China has been given the role of developing the next phase of this, the SDR and digital SDR. And so China is a big player. But interestingly too, that it was Gary, you pointed out to me right from the word go, the fact that it was basically being touted as a fulfillment of the 1988 Rothschild owned Economist magazine, or at least they owned 50% of it. And they used the Phoenix and that cover in their main trailer video. And I find it really interesting that actually the Economist magazine was chaired by Evelyn de Rothschild in 1988. He was the head of the Economist magazine, and many people believe he's the head of the Illuminati, of course, too. Whether he is or not, I don't know. But he was, the head of the magazine at the time when they put that cover out. And I've seen other videos where he's talking about their involvement in China, and of course his cousin Jacob Rothschild's also been involved in China. So there's and David de Rothschild in the US also has major Chinese interests. So I do wonder whether there is more than just a touting of this being the fulfillment, people getting onto the coattails of it, or whether there is actually Rothschild involvement in this whole AC chain.
I guess the key question it raises for me, it kind of connects with a theme or a meme or whatever we should be calling it these days that I have seen discussed in a number of we'll call them conspiratoriums regarding the decision by the New World Order to sort of move the I guess you could say the financial initiative away from the United States to China, and for whatever reason. But I know that there's I guess it's Catherine Austin Fitts that talks about the fact that for the most part, capitalization, the capital of the United States has been exiting the United States and moving overseas to invest in other things other than United States manufacturing, and so it certainly looks like China is always, it's kind of like a tale of two cities, but a bad metaphor there, in that it's the best of times and it's the worst of times. China seems to have this crazy growing economy that's on its way to 19 something trillion in GDP, which is where the United States is right now. I think China's at like 12, and so it's growing very rapidly. Happily with Trump, our economy is supposedly going to be growing 4% this next quarter, or this past quarter, which is remarkable. Some wondered if 2% was even possible. So anyway, but I think that there could well be a play underway to from the Illuminati on the, well, let's call them the world bankers if you want. We can call them that because they're virtually the same. To in effect move away from the dollar, from the petrodollar, to the yuan, which is also called something else. What's it called besides the yuan? Renminbi, yeah. I just about had that on my lips as you said it. And so the question is the renminbi, the yuan, is it going to become the sort of denominating currency of the future? Or is it, in effect, the whole movement of the so-called BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa? Is it the BRICS confederation that really is going to bring forth a new global monetary system? And whoever brings it forth, it would seem logical that the cryptocurrency concept of the blockchain, I can't define the difference between the AC chain and the blockchain right now, but it seems like that is where we're going. And in terms of the sort of the prophetic implications, it would seem that we're talking about the potential final financial system that in effect becomes the so-called mark of the beast.
It's Gary, I'll give it to you in a sec.
Okay.
I think basically what BRICS was actually the term BRICS was first come up with by an employee of Goldman Sachs, actually. So it's not even an outside the system thing. It was basically a Goldman Sachs initiative to form the whole BRICS group. Also, I know that in terms of the governments and finances, that India, they sort of supposedly clamped down on cryptocurrencies, and yet there's talk there in India of a government-backed cryptocurrency as well. And
Mm-hmm.
and also we've got Russia and China moving to basic gold-backed settlements of oil and getting away from the US dollar. But I
Right.
don't think the end result is that they're actually going to try and make the yuan or whatever, the renminbi, the global reserve currency. I think this is all stopgap measures because they intend to collapse the system when they're ready to put a complete digital system in. Because whatever way you look at it, the debt is way too high everywhere for anyone to pay it back. So they're going to have to, at some point, basically shift over to a new system, and it's just a matter of when. And I think unless there's something like a major war that comes out of left field that even they hadn't planned on, other than that, I think there'll be a slow, perhaps demolition of it until they're ready to put this new system fully in place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and this may be a part of a segue, we can talk a bit about the role of the United States and Britain and even Saudi Arabia, that kind of the grouping that is the basis for the petrodollar. One of the, I guess you could say, analytical prophecies that I've made is that Ezekiel 38:13 that talks about the Sheba and Dedan, the merchants of Tarshish, and the young lions. They're young lions, in effect, which I believe, and most prophecy scholars have argued pretty consistently, that we're dealing here with, Sheba and Dedan is a no-brainer. That's Saudi Arabia. The merchants of Tarshish is either Spain or Britain, and Britain is the much more logical for a couple of reasons, but the main one is that Britain is still thriving, whereas Spain is not. The city of London is still a very powerful entity, and then the young lions, being that England's sort of perennial icon or logo is the lion, that the young lions such as Australia, New Zealand, Canada, but principally the United States, that those three entities together comprise they actually comprise the petrodollar. In effect, the confederation that supports the petrodollar. And what I have suggested, based upon my interpretation, and I have a few people out there that have agreed with me, that the United States, the city of London, at least maybe Wall Street, the city of London, perhaps Riyadh, that they may all experience an attack that will completely destabilize, if not destroy outright, the petrodollar and clear the way for an antichrist beast system that, in effect, is put in place by perhaps the remaining forces from the Ezekiel War, which would be principally Europe, perhaps without England, but Europe plus China. That sort of rounds out all the players that are pictured in the sort of traditional prophetic scenario put forth by, I'd say, most prophecy scholars since Hal Lindsey. So that's really the last 50 years. So I guess that question is that a reasonable scenario, or one possible scenario that shows the kind of cataclysm it would take to shock the world and move away from really England and the United States, the city of London and Wall Street, is kind of you might say, the axis of economic evil, depending upon your political viewpoint, and obviously Saudi Arabia, which has been instrumental in demanding that OPEC follow its lead in terms of production and pricing and so forth for oil. So anyway, so that's been kind of my sense, and that's one of the ways you also eliminate debt. If most of your debt is owed to the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, which are principally the you might say the puppet structures of America and the United Kingdom, that one of the best ways to default is basically wiping out your creditor, so you don't have to pay them back because they don't exist anymore.
Gary, have you got any thoughts?
Yes. Well, I just wanted to say, back to China, and I agree with most of what you just said, Doug, but I want to go back to China.
Yeah.
it seems as though to me that China is being used by the technocrats, so to speak, as kind of a test site for a lot of the technocracy that they want to, institute around the world, and Acchain is one of them. Along with the smart cities and let's see, the other social credit score. It seems like that's all stuff that they, and then just total massive surveillance, which is, which is where they're using that for the social credit score. But before we move on from Acchain, I wanted to read you a couple things, and part of it has, I want to go on and just read a part that has to do with the social credit and Acchain together. It's pretty interesting to me that they're doing that. This is part of it. So, are you ready?
Yep.
I think, Tony, I think I might be reading from the same webpage that you were reading from, or, a lot of this stuff was, I think, put out on lots of different web pages at the same time in the beginning of this year. But this is one reason why I think, why I agree with Lynette Zhang that, and I am no Lynette Zhang again. I just want to say that, that A-SDR, the AC coin that is also an SDR, special drawing rights, is the only one. And this statement, I think, kind of maybe talking about that. It's talking about that and the fact that they're the only one that is digitizing all assets. So anyway, this is a statement by that same Serena Lin. She says, "To be clear, there is no one else doing this. In fact, while some of the individual features of AC coin are duplicated by other coins, there is no single coin or token offering the full spectrum of service and utility that AC coin is offering. Nor is there any similar coin that is overseen by a decentralized international committee." That's what you were talking about, Tony, IDAX. "Nor is there any similar coin operating at a supra-national level. In other words, above all nations, a level higher even than local or national sovereign digital coins." So that's what leads me to believe that they're the only ones doing the asset digitization totally, and then the creating the SDR. And I really think they're working with the IMF in that.
Yeah, one would suppose that the world bankers are not, going at and competing with one another, but they're trying to establish a global mechanism that would replace the old economic order with the new economic order.
Right.
But that they would want to squeeze out anyone, let's say like a Bitcoin that is not part of their consortium, because they don't want anybody else controlling the currency. They want to be the single controller of the currency.
When you look at sorry, I'll come to you in a sec, Gary, but yeah, when you look at the Acchain videos and they put Ethereum and Bitcoin there as part of the whole thing, and yet they have it that it looks subservient to AC coin and Acchain. And I think, maybe, perhaps Bitcoin and Ethereum and were actually sort of tests by the people behind this. We don't actually know who the real founder was of Bitcoin. Maybe this is them, and they're going to actually integrate it all in, and Bitcoin eventually dissolves into the whole Acchain, and Ethereum as well. That's just my theory. Gary?
Well, yeah, and there was a couple good articles not too long ago talking about was Bitcoin designed or created by artificial intelligence. Yeah. And I think the articles were really good on, the possibility that might have been what happened. One of the things that you read in that one statement said, representing years of work initiated even before the launch of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So sounds like Acchain they've been working on this before Bitcoin was launched, according to that. So I just wanted to throw this out before we go on about this social credit thing, because they seem to be saying that Acchain, the AC coin, is going to be related to that. And this is out of their white paper, and it's really small writing, hard to read, but So here's one little statement. It is time to leave arrogance, ignorance, parochialism, and prejudice behind. So they have all these real philosophical little statements thrown in with
that. Almost sounds like George Soros talking.
Yeah. Well, maybe he's part of it too.
He's got to be, right?
Yeah. So then here's another one where they say says that they can. It has to do with that. Distributed self-management organization, and I think that may have something to do. I don't know if that's the AI they're talking about or that other organization, but anyway, it says it's the blockchain self-management organization which can operate on its own under the rules of the minority, obeying the majority, and social equality. And then it says those rules are existing as smart contract in the blockchain. So social equality, it's a big deal. And then I think there was one other really good statement out of this. Well, I'm not going to say really good, but really telling statement about this. This is out of their white paper, and it says, by establishing Acchain and ACC, which means AC Coin, we are changing the world by building an integrated ecosystem and a social value system. So they're not just talking about money and assets. They're talking about control.
It's the new world order, isn't it? It's basically the best.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're definitely trying to establish you might say, a least common denominator across all peoples, and not only quantify our monetary or our wealth, but quantify our behavior.
Yep. There you go.
So yeah, it's very frightening, but it's the ultimate totalitarian system, and it really the real interesting question, which I don't know the answer to, is how does it get derailed? And I would think in part it gets derailed by lots of people understanding what's going on and electing people that are going to oppose it, as opposed to people that are going to just bend and do it. So perhaps the rise of sort of the Trump type of politician, perhaps that could sway things. And certainly that's one of the reasons why Trump, I think, is on such thin ice, is that he symbolizes actions that are against such globalistic types of programs.
So I'm going to say I disagree. I actually believe Donald Trump has pushed the New World Order further forward than any other president, except for perhaps George Bush Sr. And the more I look into it, the more I see I think it's very, very, very cleverly done to make it look as if Trump is opposing the New World Order, when in fact he's actually putting the system in place. The whole system is being put into place.
You can't really pick a fight out of me because, I'm not a real Donald Trump fan. I am mostly interested in someone to disrupt the system as much as possible. And, from my point of view, it appears that Trump has disrupted a lot of aspects of what's been going on in the United States.
Yeah, I agree with Tony. I think it's the Hegelian dialectic working very, very well to get conservative Christians and a lot of people that would not be on board on the with
to get them all on the train.
And then realize that before it's too late, the train is going the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Well, it could well be. I guess it raises an issue that we might want to talk about, which is kind of related to these things, which is the prophecies of, I guess, Mark Taylor predicting and talking about the whole issue of what Trump's real meaning is. Is Trump the Cyrus, of our times? Is he providing an opportunity for a kind of a revolution in American politics and perhaps prompting it around the world? Or is he really a clever deceiver that's been put in place, as you guys are saying, in terms of a Hegelian dialectic, to sort of be the opposite force, but ultimately the synthesis would still be the New World Order. And but I had a chance, Tony, to interview Paul McGuire and Troy Anderson, who have written a book called Trumpocalypse. And the interviews are on the Prophecy in the News. They're on YouTube. If folks want to see those interviews, you can just do a search for Paul McGuire and Doug Woodward. And there's already, I think, about 6 of those interviews that have been published and put out there. There's several more that have already been taped, but they haven't been published yet. But we get very much into that issue. And it is, it is, I think, probably one of the most strategic questions of our time right now is what really is going on in terms of the sort of the political stratosphere, if you will, of geopolitics.
Yeah.
I respect Paul McGuire and Troy Anderson. I've had them on the show a few times, and including talking a bit about that. But one thing that most people are not saying, and I hammer home, that the people that put out these prophecies about Trump being King Cyrus, A, Lance Wallnau, and B, Mark Taylor, are Seven Mountains Dominionists. And which I believe is complete false doctrine. So that they've got the Christians on board with this dominionist kind of idea that Donald Trump is, well, God's anointed and King Cyrus and all that. But the more I researched into it, the more I think there's something rotten to the core in this whole thing. And I've kind of dealt with it a bit in some shows. Well, and the whole thing with I don't know. Gary, you I think you saw my video I did on Neom a few days ago, did you? See, as I was uncovering stuff to do with that, and basically Trump's involvement with Saudi Arabia, and it's just setting the beast system up. It's not fighting it. It's actually it's putting all the pieces into place. And what I say, it's so very clever, I think. So, what are your thoughts there, Gary?
Well, Trump is a very high-tech guy. He loves technology, and so he's definitely helped set up a lot of stuff in that way too. Well, the one of the guys that you have on, Tony, is that Mike from On Point Preparedness, right?
Yeah.
And Doug, I'm going to send you this one video that he created about, I don't remember what it was called. Oh, I know. Something like Trump has been planning this for 35 years.
Yeah.
That is really a good video. I just showed it to my group last night, and they were pretty much speechless, because I do have a couple guys in this group. So it's just a few old guys, And I have a couple guys that really want to hold on to, that Trump's going to fix everything. And so I show them a video like that, and they kind of...
It blows you out of the water, eh? I think, Mike really excelled him with that one. That was like a massive eye-opener for me too, Mike and I talk quite a bit. But that one, that really was like a wow moment.
Let me just comment real quick that you guys can't pick a fight with me on this, because I tend to agree with you more than disagree with you. So, so I'll buy into what you're saying until I'll reserve the right to change my mind. But I definitely am suspicious, and of course I did the interviews with Paul and Troy. I mean, I liked them both a lot, and I'm glad I did the interviews. Those were great discussions, but I'm not 100% bought in to to what the meaning of Donald Trump is. And goodness knows my wife is not a Donald Trump fan, and so I have to be real careful what I say if I say anything good. Is that right?
Yeah.
Right?
So anyway, okay, well, go ahead.
As we move on, I've told Troy and Paul pretty much where I stand. I haven't been shy about it, but particularly because, we were saying well before a year out from the elections that Trump was going to be the next president pretty much. And so I never bought into this this was out of left field. No one expected it because the whole Minute to Midnight team expected Trump to be the president. I would have been hugely surprised if he wasn't. But so I greatly respect Paul and Troy, but I don't totally agree with where they're coming from in Trumpocalypse either. But they're great guys. Yeah. I like them a lot. So
they're trying to be optimistic.
Trying to be optimistic. Yeah, and
it's a false optimism.
It's not like we're pro Hillary Clinton or something either. That's the thing. If people go, would you rather have had Hillary Clinton? Not saying that. We don't like Hillary Clinton either. So now I just want to move on a little bit to, what you guys' thoughts are on the whole alien deception and UFO potential and all of this. Maybe Gary, let's have a go to you for first off on that.
Okay. I grew up here in Great Falls, Montana, where Malmstrom Air Force Base is, and where some of the more interesting UFO happenings happen in around, I think it was 67, 68, when the missile silos were shut down by the UFOs, and
yep.
There was lots of interesting stuff going on, and we used to watch, my family and I used to go down to the end of our lane. We lived on a farm, and watch the little red lights bounce around over Great Falls and wonder, what the heck is that, So it was really something that was happening quite a bit around this area. But anyway, so in, I believe it was 69, I saw 2 UFOs, and they were a little bit unique, because I just watched a video by Joe Jordan where he says the majority of them are actually just balls of light, which are still a UFO type thing, but it's not as common to see an actual object in the sky, especially in broad daylight. So anyway, I saw one. This was both within just a few days. I saw one that was just above a horizon, and I was driving, and I drove up, and then I watched it float towards Great Falls, but it was, big as a trailer, at least I'd say. And it was just black, but it was a saucer shape. And then a couple of days later, I saw another one, and this was at dusk, and it had a light on it, like a spotlight. So anyway, I'm somewhat of an experiencer. I haven't been abducted or anything, but I have seen.
I thought you had been replaced. That you really were like like one of the visitors.
I'm not sure which one I am, but which Gary I am. But so what was happening? Just cutting to the chase here, and this will actually basically kind of say what I think, is that I had been, because of the lovely Beatles, and George Harrison going off and getting into transcendental deep meditation and all that. I loved the Beatles. I was a big fan. I was in a band, and we played lots of Beatles songs. And so I went the way of the Beatles, and I got my book by the
the Maharaja.
Mahesh, Yogi.
Maharaj, yes, Yogi.
Maharishi Mahesh, yeah. So I read that, and I got into yoga, and I got into all this stuff. Well, so I was open to a lot of these things, and then I went off to college, and I was open to other New Age things. I started reading tarot cards and all kinds of crazy stuff. So I believe that me opening the door, and I can blame the Beatles, but really it was my choice, and it was a bad choice. It opened the door, and I don't believe that I would have, and I was a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that this was all part of God,
Yeah.
And so I believe that I opened the door, and that's the reason I saw those UFOs. That was just another seduction in my life. So I really believe that that's, the bottom line, what this stuff is. Then I got married. I had a Close Encounters of the
Third Kind
came out, and I just decided to go see the movie with a Christian friend of mine. And, we had no idea whether it was bad or good or ugly or whatever. But I had somebody say to me, well, you Christians all believe that anything you don't understand is from the devil. So basically, I kind of took it as a challenge, and I said, well, let's see, is that what I believe? And then, so what should I believe about UFOs? So I went and saw the movie, and then I decided, okay, I'm going to do some research. And of course, I didn't have the interweb at that time. So I went to the library. I got 2 books by secular authors, and one was Jacques Vallée.
Mm-hmm.
And, I didn't know anything about these guys. I was just trying to find stuff about UFOs. So I read a book by Jacques Vallée called The Invisible College. And then I found another book at the library was by Brad Steiger, who is a very prominent paranormal researcher. And he just passed away recently. But I don't remember the name of the book. And I actually emailed him to say, what was that book? And he couldn't tell me either. But anyway, they both, so I read those as part of my research. Then I read a couple Christian books on the subject, which actually I could find at the Christian bookstore. You couldn't find anything like that at a Christian bookstore today because it's all trinkets, pretty much.
And dominionism. Dominionism.
not much good for Bibles.
Tony set that up for me. Thank you.
Yeah. So anyway, I read those, and guess what? They all had the same conclusion. Even Brad Steiger, the paranormal researcher, and Jacques Vallée, and you probably know this, Tony, but he in that book and many of his other books, he basically says this is not an alien thing or an extraterrestrial thing. This is some sort of a not a benevolent entity. Right. And what they and his conclusion was what they are doing is working very hard and a long-term goal of changing humanity's worldview. And he said they use the same tactics as what psychologists do today to change a person's behavior or worldview or anything like that. So anyway, that was their conclusion. So I basically had to agree with this person who said, you believe this is from the devil. Well, so I read all that stuff, including the secular guys, and that's what I believe. But I do think that there are some physical craft that the Nazis downloaded the plans for, and I believe that the United States is now in possession of, and I think you might even talk about that in your book, Doug.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So one more thing, I totally forgot all about this stuff, and I wasn't even paying attention to Bible prophecy, for several years, and I thought I'm just going to enjoy life, and I was reading, John Grisham and Robert Ludlum or whatever. For several years. And then when I was at work, well, I shouldn't say this, I was at work, and I saw this web page or on the Examiner. This was in 2009, and it was Pope Benedict had a big conference on astrobiology and had brought scientists from all over the world together, and they were talking about what should the United Nations do? What is the world going to do? Who's going to talk to the extraterrestrials when they arrive, and all this, preparing the world for extraterrestrial disclosure. And that's what this Vatican's Pontifical Academy of Sciences was getting together for. And I saw that, and I said, I better start reading my Bible again, reading this Bible, looking at Bible prophecy again, because I knew this had something to do with Bible prophecy.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my story at this point.
Those were like good data points. Yeah. So let's see. Tony, have you had Nick Redford on your program before?
No, that's
okay.
not someone I've had. No.
Okay, he is he's kind of one of those guys you say is probably close to the kingdom, but I'm not quite sure he's in it yet. But he's written extensively on these subjects. He wrote a book called Final Event or Final Events, and it really carried forward these notions about that the alien presence issue really is, of course, an evil presence, and that ultimately it is trying to take over the world, basically. The story that it really is built around, it's built around a group of individuals that were assembled, that were part CIA and part sort of independent persons that were pulled together into this team. And this team was I think it first began to get together in the 1950s, probably not long after the so-called Washington Flap of, I think it was like 1953, when 2 weekends in a row in July, many UFOs appeared above Washington, D.C. Probably the most obvious case of UFOs that it doesn't get a lot of discussion, but there are pictures and there certainly is a lot of material that you can read about it. But anyway, this group came together. They did extensive interviews, research, and they kind of all came to the same conclusion that there is an evil entity, or entities, that it is a demonic, that it's seeking to, basically be like the Body Snatchers or whatever, kind of like the X-Files in their story arc and all that, and that that is what's going on. And so Nick Redfern's book I found to be one of the best, most interesting books for those of us that are Christians and are interested in the UFO phenomenon. I would say that that's one to definitely take a look at. Then the other person that has done a lot of study in this area, that has a very negative, very pessimistic view of the future, is David Jacobs, who is, I believe, he's a PhD. He may be an MD, but he teaches at like a major university in the Boston area. And Jacobs has done extensive work on alien abductions, and has written several books on alien abductions. And he also believes that, and he doesn't quite get to the point of saying it's demonic, but he would say that kind of as an analog, But I think he really believes that it is that these are aliens or extraterrestrials that have evil intent, and they're seeking to sort of take over the human race. So it's pretty much like the kind of the dark undercurrent of They Live and a bunch of other of the alien movies that we've seen. So there's the Stephen Greers that really believe that aliens are there to help us, sort of transform us and move us into a new level of evolution, that the aliens are all peaceful and kind and so forth. But there's just as many researchers that have written extensively on the subject that have a very a very pessimistic view and a very dark view of what could happen.
Right. Yeah.
I think that there's a high possibility that they're going to produce an argument as evolution falls over and say, that we're seeded here by one of these so-called alien groups here on Earth, that all the life on Earth, and that's where we came from, which doesn't actually still doesn't answer the basic question about where did they come from. All it does is put it somewhere out into the nethers,
Yeah.
But I do think that there's a possibility that this is the grand delusion, great deception that's coming, is some sort of alien disclosure, and the technology is there to tie in Project Bluebeam and holographic images and so forth, and basically putting sound into people's heads as well, voices and so on, that they could potentially have a small number of craft, have actual nuts and bolts craft, and augment it with a whole lot of holographs to make it appear like there's an awful lot more than what there are, and You know, and maybe it'll be a world war or something, and then suddenly these aliens appear as the savior. I don't know how it'll play out, but I've got a suspicion that this isn't just going to be one of those little things that stays in the back of, we wonder if there's UFOs, like it's been since the 60s and 70s. Right. And I think there's going to come a point where it actually becomes a very, very big issue.
I think so too. Yeah.
There's a fella. Have you? Are you familiar with Stan Deyo?
Yeah, I've had him on the show 4 or 5 times. Okay. Yeah, he's great. Yeah,
I thought you might be. He was gracious and wrote a foreword for a book that Anthony Patch, myself, Josh Peck, Gans Shimura wrote called Revising Reality, and Stan did a foreword that talked about his experience working for Edward Teller and Sir John something and so forth in Australia. Is it Pine Bluff? Is that the name of the? I'm not sure of it. I think that's the name of it. It was a U.S. project in Australia. Yeah. I can't explain it, but it was, and it involved the deep underground military base, and it involved certainly Stan talked about it, I'm sure, with you in terms of all the research that they were doing in terms of anti-gravity and UFOs and so forth. And so we kind of know, there's several ways we could go, and in terms of Stan's revelations that he really laid out in great detail in his foreword in our book. But it really is pretty astounding what he said, because this program was going on in Australia in the 70s, and by the middle to the end of the 70s, all of the humans left the project because the aliens had basically taken over. Of course, Stan believes the aliens are fallen angels or Nephilim or demons or whatever, but they're not really extraterrestrials.
Yep, and Stan actually tells, I can't remember, that in one of our programs he details that story and how he ended up on the run, and there was a big Jesuit priest that was sent to kill him, and so on. It's definitely worth people going back through our archives and finding that interview with Stan.
I'm gonna go find it. Yeah, that sounds great.
It's a really, really interesting interview, and Stan is an excellent guy to interview. Of course, he wrote that book, The Cosmic Conspiracy, which was a big eye opener as well.
I might just mention an area I think that's been going on this last week. Stan was on Hagman and Hagman with Daniel List, who is he goes by Dark Journalist. That is his sort of brand. And the two of them talked for about 30 minutes. And Daniel has been doing, for the last 3 months, some really fascinating shows on Friday evenings, typically running about 2.5 hours. And usually does about an hour and 15 minutes of sort of lecture. And then about an hour or so, hour and 15 minutes of questions. But the center piece of it has been really what is called sort of the X plan, but it is built around X and deals a lot with the Majestic 12, Eisenhower, into Kennedy, into Nixon, into LBJ, and the other presidents, and how the presidents in the U.S. have attempted they've wanted to control, rather than the CIA controlling, they've wanted to control the so-called X file, if you will, on the extraterrestrials and so forth. One of the things that Daniel had, this is probably a good one to kind of as a tease for folks. Again, his website is Dark Journalist, and you'll find Daniel List or Dark Journalist all over YouTube. He's done stuff for years, but these are the shows he's done in the last 3 months. And this last week, again, the show he did on Hagman and Hagman with Stan Deyo was really interesting, because Stan was introducing Daniel to some things that Daniel didn't really know. Daniel doesn't really understand fully the Christian view of the extraterrestrial phenomenon. And Stan, of course, was able to talk to Daniel in terms that Daniel would not readily reject. He would be open to those discussions. But anyway, this whole subject of the president, U.S. presidents, I guess what Daniel had done, this was about 3 months ago or 4 months ago. He had a gentleman on who was the attorney for the Watergate guys, a guy named Douglas Caddy. And Caddy was a friend of E. Howard Hunt, who, of course, was supposedly the ringleader of the plumbers that did the burglary at the Watergate. And before Hunt went to prison, Caddy finally got him to tell him why it was. Hunt was involved, by the way, in the Kennedy assassination, which, so sorry, it wasn't just Lee Harvey Oswald. And he's confessed and all that on video with his son and so forth. But anyway, Howard Hunt told Caddy that the reason Kennedy was assassinated, there's lots of reasons, but the one reason that people don't know is that he was going to tell the Russians about the alien presence. And the alien presence really was something that the U.S. viewed that it had kind of the exclusive on. And supposedly, in fact, Nixon tells another fellow that, it's not Hinckley, it's another name, forget his name, but anyway, it's in one of the shows, that that there is an alien that is not in captivity, but is in protective custody, is the way Nixon said it. And so this really was kind of one of the things that kind of kicked off this whole research into X and the X file that the U.S. presidents really have been striving to take away from the prerogatives, really from the CIA, and own them at the level of the president.
Interesting. I was just thinking, as you were saying that, the demonic that I believe inhabits these bodies, like a biological suit almost, the alien greys and so on. I was thinking, man, the way artificial intelligence is going and transhumanism and all that, they're not even hardly going to need those after a while. They could probably just about inhabit the, the artificial intelligence and the robots and things and drive those in the future. But maybe they'll still, have the alien greys or whatever. But, if the satanic entities are looking for control and to inhabit something that actually a physical body, then the way it's going, it's advancing so quick in that area. But anyway, we better not go down that track. So our time's pretty much.
Definitely, that's another show for sure.
It is. Yeah, so we better look at sort of wrapping up. Gary, have you got some thoughts there?
I do. Well, first of all, I wanted to mention you were talking about panspermia, the aliens seeding us, and you probably know that Richard Dawkins, the famous atheist, he's already bought into that because he knows evolution doesn't tell the whole story, doesn't quite make,
doesn't give us the answer.
Sense. Yeah, it doesn't give us the answer. So he actually bought into panspermia, which still doesn't give him the answer, but like you said. But anyway, and I wanted to throw this out too, a little interesting thing. One of my good friends that I'm going to have lunch with tomorrow here in Great Falls, his brother-in-law is Daniel Sheehan, who is, one of the big guys in the disclosure movement. He was a lawyer for the Jesuits. He's done a lot of stuff, but he's one that believes he's the guy with the really fluffy white hair. Have you seen that?
Oh yeah. Well, I certainly recognize the name.
Yeah, and he's in the big UFO conferences and all that kind of stuff. But so one of these days, I'm hoping to meet him since my is related. But anyway, and he's one that believes, the aliens are good guys and they're going to help us out. So he's all for that. But anyway, I just wanted to end by saying this. I think that when if this extraterrestrial disclosure thing, or however they're going to do it, like you said, Tony, maybe a big war and then they come down and save us all as our saviors. I think that is what's happening is, and I was watching part of your deal with John Haller and how he talks about a convergence. Well, it seems like 2018 is a big convergence year for sure. But he... maybe
the final convergence year.
It may be. And but a lot of things come together with this alien thing, and I think it goes back to a lot of the occult and mystery school stuff and all that, and Alice Bailey's thing, the externalization of the hierarchy.
Yeah.
And so I think they're going to show all this, and they're going to say, well, this is what this is. This is actually the hierarchy, and they are going to be manifest. They're going to be externalized once and for all for the whole world to see, and so they're going to blend, science, the New Age, and the ancient aliens, astronauts, and ascended masters, all of this stuff. And really, this is going back to the ancient gods from Babel,
right?
The divine council,
Marduk.
Fallen divine council, as Michael Heiser would say. Right. So I think really that's what it is, blending it all together and in one big religious soup without Christianity, of course. Can't have that.
Yes, yeah.
A very strange brew, to quote Eric Clapton and Cream, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
A strange brew.
Yeah. That was a good song too, that one.
It was, wasn't it? It was an odd song, especially for the 1960s.
Yeah. All right, so I guess we'll leave it at that for this show. Do you guys want to give our listeners your websites?
Love to. Yeah, you can find me in a couple places. You can find me on Amazon. Do a search on S, as in Stephen S. Douglas Woodward, and my website. You can either find it by going to faith-happens.com, or you can just do a doomsdaydoug.com. We'll also get you there. Doomsday Doug is all one word. Doomsdaydoug.com. That'll take you there.
Yeah, and my website is the one for the book that Doug and I wrote together, and that is the-revealing.com. So it's all about that book, The Revealing.
Awesome. Well, it's been great chatting to you guys again today, and I can see that we've, basically have some other subjects itching to follow on from this, so we'll have to maybe come back in not too long and carry on again in another show.
That'd be great.
Great, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, so cheers. Thanks for being on the A Minute to Midnight show today, guys.
Thank you,
Tony.
Well, I thought that was a pretty enjoyable discussion, and you can find all of our shows on our website, aminutemidnight.com, on YouTube and on iTunes. And don't forget to like this video on YouTube if you're watching it, and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already done so. And A Minute to Midnight is run by a team, and we run it entirely by donations, and we do greatly appreciate it when people help us by donating, and you can find ways to do that on our website, aminutemidnight.com. There is a donation page there, and the music in our shows is all written, played and recorded by me, and you can find some free music, including a collection, volume 2 of A Minute to Midnight music, on the website as well, on the free music page. I think that's about all I wanted to say for this show, so I hope you enjoyed it, and we will catch you back with another show in a few days' time. Until then, have a great week, God bless, and this is Tony signing out.